On a quiet Sunday morning in Paris, the golden silence of the Louvre's Apollo Gallery was broken by the shriek of an angle grinder. While the world focused on the shocking loss, a different, more complex story was unfolding right there on the floor. In their chaotic escape, the thieves left behind 3 legendary survivors. And that is the story we're going to tell today. This is the story of how 3 miraculously saved masterpieces became witnesses to the disappearance of an entire era, and why we will most likely never see the stolen jewels again. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. 7 minutes. That's all it took to tear a hole in 2 centuries of French history. It was a Sunday morning, October 19th. Paris was just beginning to stir, the gentle light catching the waters of the Seine. But inside the Louvre, in the magnificent Apollo Gallery, the peace was shattered by the harsh buzz of an angle grinder. Using a construction lift placed on the riverside of the museum, a team of 3 or 4 professionals broke a window and entered the gallery. They were swift, they were precise, and they knew exactly what they wanted. Their target, the priceless collection of French crown jewels resting in their glass cases. The sound of shattering displays must have echoed through that golden hall as they moved with brutal efficiency. But in their haste, in the frantic scramble to seize as much as possible, something happened that changes the entire story. Perhaps their hands were too full, perhaps they were startled by an alarm. In the chaos of their escape, 3 objects fell from their grasp, 3 legends left behind on the floor. And so, while other priceless artifacts vanished into the morning light, possibly forever, these 3 remained. Wounded, yes, but surviving witnesses to the crime. We will absolutely return to the incredible stories of these survivors a little later. But first, we must turn to the empty spaces they left behind, to the ghosts of the Apollo Gallery and the treasures we have lost. So, who did we lose that day? The first empty space in the display case belongs to a truly breathtaking emerald parure, and its story begins not just with love, but with politics. The year is 1810. Emperor Napoleon, having divorced his beloved Josephine for failing to produce an heir, marries Louise of Austria. She was the young daughter of his longtime enemy, the Austrian emperor. This marriage was a powerful diplomatic move, meant to secure peace and finally give Napoleon the dynasty he craved. And a gift for such an important bride had to be magnificent. He commissioned his court jeweler, François Regnault Nitto, to create not 1, but 2 grand parures for his new empress. One was set with opals, which sadly has been lost to time, but the other was a masterpiece of Colombian emeralds and diamonds, and it is the necklace and earrings from this very set that were stolen. Just look at the details. The necklace alone is composed of 32 vibrant emeralds, surrounded by a staggering 874 brilliant cut and 264 rose-cut diamonds. It is a superb example of First Empire design, both grand and yet exquisitely detailed. What I find so fascinating is that this wasn't considered a state jewel. It was the Empress's personal property. So, when Napoleon's empire crumbled in 1814 and Louise fled Paris, she took this emerald set with her. It was a tangible link to her brief, dazzling reign as Empress of the French. At her death, she bequeathed the set to her Habsburg relatives, and for nearly 150 years it remained with them, a private treasure hidden from public view. It wasn't until 1953 that it was sold to the famed jewelers Van Cleef and Arpels. After that, it passed into a private collection before finally, in 2004, the Louvre was able to bring this piece of French history back home, and now it is gone again. And what makes this loss even more poignant is thinking about what's missing from the original set. This necklace and earrings were once part of a complete parure that included a magnificent tiara. That very tiara still exists today, and you can see it at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., but it's a shadow of its former self. When the set passed through the hands of Van Cleef and Arpels in the 1950s, the firm removed all the original historic emeralds to sell them off individually. They then replaced them with turquoise. So while the frame of the tiara survived, its original soul, its connection to Marie Louise's emeralds, was lost. It's a sad preview of what can happen when a historic piece is valued for its parts rather than its whole. The next empty space in the gallery holds the ghost of a parure that witnessed the turbulent heart of 19th century France, the magnificent Orléans sapphire parure. And just like the era it represents, its story is full of twists and turns. Its exact origins are a bit of a mystery. While the Orléans family tradition claimed the jewels came from Queen Marie Antoinette, a letter from 1821 confirms a different, and perhaps even more fascinating, beginning. In that letter, the future King Louis-Philippe reveals he purchased the sapphires from none other than Hortense de Beauharnais, the daughter of Empress Josephine and Napoleon's stepdaughter. So, in a wonderful twist of fate, these jewels passed from the inner circle of the First Empire directly into the hands of the family that would one day rule France as its last monarchy. Louis-Philippe bought the parure for his wife, Marie-Amélie. At the time of the purchase, they were the Duke and Duchess of Orléans, but just 9 years later, in 1830, the political winds shifted dramatically, and Louis-Philippe was proclaimed King of the French. Queen Marie-Amélie, a woman of quiet dignity, preferred her personal jewels to the state's grander collections, and she wore this sapphire set often. There is a beautiful portrait of her from the 1830s where she is wearing the complete parure, its deep blue sapphires a striking contrast against her gown. It's wonderful to be able to see the jewels as they were meant to be worn, brought to life by a queen. The parure remained a treasured heirloom of the Orleans family for over 150 years, passing down through generations of countesses and duchesses who wore it at some of the grandest royal events in Europe. And these jewels weren't just for portraits and state balls, they lived through real moments of danger. The last Countess of Paris, who wore the parure for decades, shared an absolutely incredible story about it. In 1974, she was at her country house in Portugal when a revolution suddenly exploded. Fearing for the safety of the family heirlooms, she decided she had to get them back to Paris. But how do you transport such a famous set of jewels through a country in chaos? She made an audacious decision. She wore them, all of them, including the tiara, which she hid under a huge fur hat. Can you even imagine? As she was about to board her plane, she was directed towards a metal detector. She said, "I almost had a heart attack." She walked through, and nothing happened. The metal detector was broken. A tiny twist of fate saved one of France's greatest treasures. It's a fantastic story that reminds us just how much personal history is wrapped up in these stones. But by the 1980s, the family's fortunes had dwindled. With a heavy heart, the head of the family, Henri, Count of Paris, decided to sell the parure. In 1985, he sold it to the Louvre, ensuring that this piece of French history would remain in France for all to see. To lose it now feels like reopening an old wound. The current head of the House of Orléans, Jean, expressed this feeling perfectly. He said, "These jewels are not just family heirlooms. They are a living part of our national history. Their disappearance touches me deeply and represents, I believe, a deep wound for the French people." And I think he's absolutely right. It's not just the loss of beautiful objects, it's the loss of the stories they carry, of the very fabric of a nation's past. And tragically, in the robbery, the thieves didn't even take the whole set. They snatched the tiara, the necklace, but only one of the earrings, leaving its partner behind like a sad, solitary reminder of what has been lost. And now we must speak of perhaps the most spectacular, the most iconic piece taken in this theft, Empress Eugenie's pearl tiara. This is a jewel that truly embodies the glamour and grandeur of the Second Empire. It was commissioned in 1853 by Emperor Napoleon III for his new bride, the captivating Eugenie de Montijo. He had just declared himself emperor, and their marriage was the event of the season. The tiara had to be a showstopper, and it was. Crafted with stones already in the French crown collection, some previously worn by Empress Marie Louise and the Duchesse d'Angoulême, It is a symphony of pearls and diamonds. And the design itself is a masterclass in balance and form. It's composed of scrolling, pelt-shaped cartouches set with diamonds, each one cradling arrangements of pearls. Alternating between them are 7 delicate stems, each topped with 3 large superimposed pearls. The whole structure rests on a band of round pearls and diamond leaves. It creates this wonderful sense of height and light, making the pearls almost float above the wearer's head. It's no wonder it became one of the most iconic jewels of the era. Empress Eugenie, a true fashion icon whose style was copied across the world, knew the power of a magnificent jewel. She wore this tiara for one of her most famous portraits by the artist Franz Xaver Winterhalter, painted shortly after her wedding. The painting cemented the image of the tiara in the public imagination, making it forever hers. She also chose it for a hugely important state visit to the United Kingdom in 1855, when Queen Victoria invested Napoleon III with the Order of the Garter at Windsor Castle. It was a jewel made for the grandest of stages. When the Second Empire fell in 1870, the Empress went into exile, but the tiara remained in France. After being displayed at several exhibitions, it was sold at the infamous auction of the French crown jewels in 1887 for 78,100 francs. A few years later, it found a new royal home. Prince Albert of Thurn und Taxis, from one of Germany's wealthiest and most noble families, purchased it as a wedding gift for his bride, Archduchess Margaret Clementine of Austria. The tiara remained with the Thurn und Taxis family for a century. Then, in the 1980s, it had a dazzling renaissance. The famously vibrant and stylish Princess Gloria von Schönberg-Glauchau wore it when she married Prince Johannes of Thurn und Taxis. She even wore it to a lavish costume ball for her husband's 60th birthday, where she dressed as Marie Antoinette. It's quite something to imagine this historic tiara, once the pride of an empress, lighting up the parties of the punk princess, as Gloria was known. But after the prince's death, the family needed to bolster its finances. In 1992, the tiara was the star of a famous Sotheby's auction, and in a wonderful act of historical repatriation, it was acquired by the Friends of the Louvre, finally returning home to be displayed alongside the other French crown jewels. To think of its incredible journey, from an empress's portrait to a German princely family to the glamorous parties of the 80s and finally back to Paris, makes its loss now all the more heartbreaking. 3 great losses, but let's return for a moment to the scene of the crime. Amidst the chaos and the loss, there was a small glimmer of hope. We now know that thanks to the incredibly swift response of the Louvre's security agents, the thieves were forced to flee, leaving 2 of the treasures behind. And the first of these incredible survivors is one of the most magnificent jewels in the entire collection, Empress Eugenie's grand diamond bow brooch. If any jewel can be said to have a will to survive, it is this one. Its story is one of constant transformation and incredible journeys. It began its life as the centerpiece of a diamond belt, a truly staggering creation made for the 1855 Universal Exhibition in Paris. That belt was set with over 4,000 stones from the crown's collection. Empress Eugenie wore the full belt at least twice, most notably at a grand ball at Versailles held for Queen Victoria in 1855. It must have been an absolutely dazzling sight. Sometime after, the belt was redesigned, and this enormous bow, with its 2 large articulated tassels, was made into a separate brooch. Set with over 2,400 diamonds, it was designed to be worn as a dramatic corsage ornament. But like the other jewels, its life in France was cut short. After the fall of the empire, it was sold at the 1887 auction. And this is where its remarkable second life begins. It was purchased by a jeweler on behalf of none other than Caroline Astor, the formidable queen of New York high society. From the glittering ballrooms of Paris to the equally glittering ballrooms of Gilded Age New York. What a journey. Around 1902, the bow crossed the Atlantic again, this time purchased by the Duke of Westminster as a wedding gift for his daughter, who became Countess Beauchamp. The brooch remained in the Beauchamp family for decades, worn by 2 generations of countesses at grand state occasions, including the state opening of Parliament. It was a jewel that was clearly loved and worn. Then, around 1980, the last Countess Beauchamp sold the brooch to the jeweler Ralph Esmerian in New York. After several more decades of being exhibited and appearing at auctions, the Louvre was finally able to acquire it in 2008, thanks to the Society of Friends of the Louvre. Think of it. This brooch survived being dismantled from a belt. It survived the fall of an empire, an auction, 2 trips across the ocean, and decades in some of the world's most famous private collections. And now, it has survived once more. It's a testament not only to the security team, but, one might almost say, to the jewel itself. It simply refuses to disappear from history. And alongside that incredible bow, another treasure was recovered at the scene. It's a piece known as the reliquary brooch, and if the bow's survival was a matter of resilience, then this brooch's survival feels like nothing short of a miracle. At first glance, it's a beautiful diamond brooch from the Second Empire, made for Empress Eugenie in 1855 by the jeweler Alfred Bapst. But its true significance, its soul, is much, much older. The secret lies in the 2 large, spectacular diamonds at its center. These are not just any stones. They are part of the legendary collection of Mazarin diamonds. For anyone who loves history, that name is electric. Cardinal Mazarin, the chief minister to the young King Louis XIV, bequeathed a collection of 18 exceptional diamonds to the French crown upon his death in 1661. These 2 stones in Eugenie's brooch are numbers 17 and 18 from that historic collection. Just take a moment to absorb that. These are diamonds that entered the royal treasury during the Golden Age of Versailles. They would have glittered in the candlelight at the court of the Sun King. To lose this brooch would have been more than just losing a 19th century jewel. It would have meant severing a direct, tangible link to the 17th century, to the very heart of France's royal heritage. But that link was not broken. The official report from the Ministry of Culture confirms that the reliquary brooch was one of the 2 items recovered right there at the scene, in good condition. In their haste, the thieves dropped a piece of history that had survived revolutions, the fall of monarchies, and the Great Auction of 1887. To think that this small, precious connection to the world of Louis XIV was saved by a moment of haste in the midst of such a destructive act, it truly feels like a miracle. So we have the resilient bow and the miraculous reliquary brooch. But there is a third survivor in this story, a piece that seems to have been born under a lucky star, Empress Eugenie's crown. From its very creation, this crown has had a unique and rather fortunate destiny. It was made in 1855, a breathtaking piece of gold, diamonds, and Empress Eugenie's favorite gemstones, emeralds. But it wasn't intended for a coronation. Unlike the regalia of kings and queens past, this was a showpiece, designed to dazzle the world at the Universal Exhibition in Paris. It was a crown of spectacle, not of state. And this distinction proved to be its salvation. When the French government made the fateful decision to sell off most of the crown jewels in 1887, an event we will certainly talk more about, this crown was spared. Because it was not a state jewel, it was deemed the Empress's personal property. So, while so many other historic treasures were sold off and scattered across the globe, the crown was returned to Eugenie herself in her exile in England. I find that image incredibly poignant. The exiled, widowed empress receiving this beautiful reminder of her former life. The crown eventually made its way back to the Louvre in 1988, its long journey seemingly complete. Until that Sunday morning. It was seized by the thieves along with the other jewels, but in their chaotic escape, it was dropped. It survived. But this final escape came at a cost. Reports confirm the crown was damaged in the fall. It was saved, but not entirely unscathed. And so the story of the survivors comes to a close. 3 magnificent pieces, saved by a combination of quick thinking from security and pure, incredible chance. It's a relief, of course it is. But for me, This small victory only serves to highlight the immense scale of the tragedy. Because while we celebrate these three, we are left to mourn the six that vanished. The complete emerald parure of Empress Marie-Louise, gone. The historic sapphire parure of Queen Marie-Amélie, torn apart and taken. Empress Eugenie's iconic pearl tiara, lost. The joy for what was saved is completely overshadowed by the devastation of what wasn't. And this is where the story takes a truly ironic and deeply tragic turn. To fully understand the loss of these jewels, we have to ask a crucial question. Why were so many of them, like Eugenie's tiara and bow brooch, in private hands to begin with? Why did the Louvre have to spend decades buying back France's own history? The answer lies in an event that I can only describe as an act of historical vandalism, committed by the French state itself. We have to go back to 1887. The Third Republic was in power, a government deeply suspicious of France's royal and imperial past. Monarchist groups were still agitating for a restoration, and in the halls of government, a powerful and radical idea took hold. Without a crown, there is no need for a king. The decision was made to sell the French crown jewels. The goal was not to raise money, it was to erase the symbols of monarchy, to physically dismantle the heritage that could inspire a return to the old ways. Just imagine the scene. In May of 1887, in the Pavillon de Flore, right there at the Louvre, the treasures of a nation were put up for auction. The world's most famous jewelers descended upon Paris, eager to acquire legendary pieces. The biggest winner was the American jeweler Tiffany & Company, who snapped up nearly a third of the lots, sending pieces of French royal history to the new millionaires of America's Gilded Age. Van Cleef and Arpels bought a diadem. Carl Fabergé acquired a legendary pearl for his Russian clients. The 18 Mazarin diamonds, the legacy of Louis XIV, were almost entirely dispersed. The result was a cultural catastrophe. Most of the magnificent historic settings were immediately broken up, the stones reset to suit new fashions. The Empress Eugenie's incredible floral designs, which were so influential, were lost forever. It was at this very sale that Empress Eugenie's pearl tiara was sold to the Thurn-on-Taxis family, beginning its long journey through Germany. It's where her diamond bow brooch began its transatlantic adventure when it was bought for Caroline Astor. They were cast out, exiled by their own country. And the ultimate irony? Even by the standards of the day, the sale was a failure. It didn't even raise the money the government had hoped for. And, by flooding the market with so many important gems, it temporarily depressed their value. For the last century, France has been trying to claw back what it so recklessly discarded, often paying far, far more than what it received. And so, history comes full circle in the most painful way. The very jewels that the state cast out in the 19th century to erase a political past have now been stolen in the 21st century to be erased for profit. The motive is different, ideology versus greed, but the result is the same, the irreversible destruction of irreplaceable history. So, what happens now? This is the question that hangs in the air, the one filled with the most dread. Where do these priceless historic jewels go from here? And this leads us to the grim reality of a crime like this. The truth is, these pieces can never be sold as they are. They are simply too famous, too recognizable. In the jewelry world, Empress Eugenie's pearl tiara is as identifiable as a painting by Rembrandt. No reputable dealer would touch it, and any attempt to sell it on the open market would be an instant red flag. This means the thieves are left with a terrible, destructive choice. In order to profit from their crime, they must destroy the very thing that makes these jewels priceless. They must break them apart. The historic, masterful settings will be melted down for the base value of their gold. The stones, the diamonds, the sapphires, the emeralds, will be pried from their settings, potentially recut to alter their appearance, and then slowly, carefully sold off one by one on the black market. It's a brutal, senseless calculation. The vast majority of the value of these pieces lies in their history, their provenance, their craftsmanship as a whole. By dismantling them, the thieves are essentially destroying 90% of their true worth. And sadly, we have heartbreaking precedents for this. We only need to look at the tragic fate of the Portland tiara in England. This was a national treasure, a magnificent diamond tiara by Cartier, stolen in a brazen heist from a private estate in 2018. And today, it is believed to have been barbarically broken apart, its identity and history completely erased. And this vulnerability isn't limited to private homes. It can happen in what should be the most secure places imaginable. We saw it in the devastating loss of Queen Maud of Norway's pearl tiara. This beautiful tiara was a wedding gift to Maud from her parents, the future King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra. In 1995, Queen Sonia sent the cherished heirloom to Galerie in London, the crown jewelers, for maintenance. The unthinkable happened. The jeweler was robbed, and the tiara vanished. Despite a massive investigation, it was never recovered. The accepted belief is that it was immediately dismantled, its components sold off, lost forever. It's a chilling reminder that even in the most trusted hands, a piece of royal history can be erased in an instant. These two stories paint a grim and, frankly, the most likely picture. But is there another possibility? A different, though still tragic scenario? It's the theory of a sponsored theft, that this wasn't a random smash and grab, but a highly targeted heist carried out on behalf of a wealthy, obsessive collector who simply had to possess these pieces. In this scenario, the jewels would remain intact, hidden away in a private vault, to be admired only by their new secret owner. And as some have pointed out, perhaps that is the lesser of two evils. At least they would still exist. But let's be clear. This is still a devastating loss. A masterpiece hidden in a private vault is a masterpiece silenced. So we are left with two terrible possibilities: destruction or a private prison. In either case, the outcome for the world, for history, and for us is the same. These treasures, meant to be shared, have vanished from our sight. And this is what I keep thinking back to. What makes this feel so personal? I remember talking about these very jewels in past videos. There was always this wonderful certainty to it. I could say with confidence that these memorable pieces of history were safe, on display in the Louvre, where any of us could go and see them with our own eyes. It made history feel close, accessible. And now, that certainty is gone. That reference point has vanished. Of course, I am so truly happy, so relieved that some of the jewels did survive this ordeal. The fact that the bow, the reliquary brooch, and the crown were saved is a small miracle in this whole terrible affair. But that joy is tinged with such a profound sense of irreparable loss for what is gone. And that's the heart of the matter, isn't it? This feels like a robbery from all of us. These jewels stopped being the private property of empresses long ago. They had become public art, tangible pieces of our shared human story, meant for everyone to see and wonder at. It leaves you with such a feeling of helplessness. The idea that one person's immense wealth and selfishness could allow them to simply decide that a chapter of history now belongs only to them, it's infuriating. It feels like a violation. And so we are left with two terrible possibilities: destruction or a private prison. In either case, a piece of our collective history has been stolen, and we may never get it back. And so, we come to the end of a very complex and rather sad story today. It would mean so much to me to hear your thoughts. Which of these stories resonated with you the most? Please let me know down below. If you enjoyed this little journey into history, please support it with a like. It would make me incredibly happy. And of course, please subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Thank you for being here with me. Take care and cherish the beauty that surrounds us.